Hey everyone, my name is Brandis from GEM. I feel like I haven't seen you guys in so long. Welcome back to WTF. WTF has been on like this like weird hiatus, and I have missed it so much. So I am so excited to get this group together today to talk about 2025 TA planning, which I know everyone is super excited about and loves. First, a couple of housekeeping notes. You will see a chat feature over there. Feel free to go back and forth. We're going to share some expertise, ideas, best practices, challenges, wins, all of those things from our side. But we also want you guys to share what's going on for you. So don't be shy in the chat. The other thing is there's a Q&A function. I like to answer questions as they're coming in. So when you hear something that you want to know more about, go ahead and drop your question in the Q&A. If you love the question, upvote the question, and we'll ask the panel live. So with that, I am going to bring our panelists on stage. We're all here. Amazing. Nona, Jeremy, Nicole, we're going to start with some quick intros, but also with your intro, I'd like to ask one question here at WTF, and that is, what is a song that is getting you through your WTF moments this week? Nicole, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. Brandis, thanks for having me here. My name is Nicole. I'm based in the Austin, Texas metro area, and I lead recruiting at Lattice. If you hadn't heard of Lattice, we exist to manage people and their performance to make work meaningful. So when your people perform, your business does too. So Lattice helps to transform your people strategy, connecting performance management, employee engagement, career development in one unified solution that now also includes an HRIS. So, and the song that's getting me through, I'm not on Christmas music just yet. I stand by Thanksgiving first, and then we switch over to Christmas music. So for me, it would actually have to be a Taylor Swift song. And it's from the Reputation album, which is Ready for It. And that's what gets me pumped up every morning.
Okay, that's a good one. That's a good one. Nona.
Yeah. Hi, thanks for having me today. Nona Renfro. I am Senior Director for Micron Technology for Global TA, and super excited to join today. I'm based out of Dallas, Texas. I'm currently in San Jose this week, and I'm also co-founder for IC2 Talent Acquisition Technologies as well. So super happy to be here. And you know, I love me some Teddy Swims, and just because I'm new in my role here, probably Lose Control is the song I'm listening to. But I love Teddy Swims.
I love that song. It just started playing in my head as you were saying that. Nona, thank you for being here. Jeremy.
So, hi, Jeremy Lyons, co-founder of RecOps Collective, and which is a business centered around recruiting operations and providing resources to the recruiting operations community. And song that is getting me through, I had one in my head. Then Nicole mentioned Taylor Swift, and my brain immediately went back to what was I listening to last night. And it was either some mashup of Florida and I can hear the song in my head, but now I can't remember it. But it was Taylor Swift. But I was originally going to go with "Don't Get in My Way" by Zach Hempsey. It's a song from like probably about 10 years ago. But I do like kind of the style. As a former DJ, my brain's always playing like 12 tracks.
Former DJ, okay. You might have to share some playlists with the group after the session so we can continue to get through our WTF moments. All right, so if you're watching, listen, like this mix of people, I think is like the perfect combination to talk about things, you know, at different size businesses, you know, working in different roles, you know, from different, I just said that, working in different roles. I'm on repeat today. It's Tuesday. I need coffee. So I want to start with the big picture because, you know, folks that work in TA, when you're planning, you know, obviously we all want to stay away from being order takers, being strategic partners, having a seat at the table. We've all heard these conversations, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, we need to bring the right people in so the business continues to exceed. So let's start with the big picture. how do you ensure your TA plan aligns with your company's broader business goals? And what's your approach to making it clear to leadership how TA is going to support those objectives? Nona, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's really open conversations. For me, I think the example here is, being new, I am spending time, investing time, doing what is called it's a Gemba walk. It's a Six Sigma procedure where I invest that time to hear about the business, what's working well, what's not for NTA. So hear from the business. And I talk to partners as well. So I can really not just have the recruiting side of the story, but I invest that time into understanding from both a partner, so your HR partners, comp partners, finance partners, and the business leaders, what's working well in TA, what's not, and talk through results and really listen and learn, I think has been really helpful for me here and throughout my career, because then I can understand pain points from the business perspective. My recruiting team always fills me in, so I know going in kind of where their pain points are, and then I can connect the two and have conversations and back with all those same people on how do we align. Here's what I see our priorities are. Does it align with your business needs? So I think that's really important, just to have those very open conversations and be open to listening.
Yeah, Nona just said a bunch of really smart stuff. Nicole, Jeremy, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when you're wondering where to start with this, which is probably what a lot of TA leaders are thinking about right now. Maybe you're in the middle of annual planning. Maybe your leaders are in the middle of annual planning. And what really helps me is thinking about, what is your company focused on right now? Just very simply, are you more focused on growth or profitability, right? And there's been a huge shift in the market, depending on what industry or space that your particular business is operating in. And then take that, and it's kind of like I think about a flow chart, if you will. So depending on what that is, then speak in the same language and in the same priorities as the businesses that your TA team is supporting. Like Nona talked a lot about the partnerships of all the people that we're working with, but what terminology is your engineering team, your product team, your marketing team, your sales team, your customer team? What are they speaking in? How are they thinking about it? And then that's really where to focus, and then speaking in that same language. And that really positions you as a TA leader to be in that same level of conversation.
Yeah, and just to build literally off of what Nicole was saying, getting that language alignment, I think, is just so key. One of the things that I've also done in the past has been to kind of build out almost like a dictionary, or how are people using the words in their functions to do that exact piece that Nicole was talking about, and some of the pieces that Nona has been talked about too. It's about kind of finding the constellation that people are aiming for, not necessarily just one complete North Star, but also working with people to sort of say, okay, how should we be restacking things and priorities as things shift, so that people also know that the conversation they're having now is still going to be impactful 6 months from now, and that you were actually listening to listen, not just listening to be heard.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes it's like, it's much more, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. It just seems like we're grasping at things in the ether. Like, there's hypotheticals, right? Like, if you show up a certain way, like, your CEO is going to react to you a certain way. If you can speak, intelligently to your CFO, like, your budget's going to get approved. And you're kind of like, if you look at it from TA's perspective, right? There's so many people to, like, get on board, to please, to, you know what I mean? Like, make friends with, send them donuts, like, whatever it is. So I'm curious, like, not everyone always gets it. Like, have you had leadership push back on your goals because, like, they really just didn't get it? Like, how did you handle that, Nicole?
Absolutely. So the biggest way to push back is, again, aligning with the business need. So things change really quickly. The one thing that we can count on is change, right? So what if the product team wants to capitalize on an idea in the market. Like, you think about the rate of change that's been going on, and to be able to meet that pace of innovation. Recruiting is not a faucet, and most leaders understand that. And it's good to be, putting that up in the top of what those leaders are thinking about. So then if we do need to react, because we don't have the resources that we've put in place, then the cost ends up tending to be quite a bit higher, and the quality is not necessarily where we want it to be, because it's put us into this more reactive state as opposed to proactive state. This is something I think everyone can empathize with. Think about agency fees, which I love my agency partners. That's great. But if it's not something that you're planning on and it's not part of your strategic plan, then that ends up being a larger cost and not building into the overall plan. So this is where it's like tying back to roadmap, tying back to not having incidents, tying back to missed out revenue is really, again, speaking in that same language that the company and the business leaders are speaking in.
Yeah, totally. So I feel like as leaders, the job is to come up with, I don't even know why I'm about to say this because I don't watch Star Wars, but like what's the big, is it the Death Star, like the big ship thing? Okay.
Yes, it would be.
Okay, so you're the captain of the Death Star. Please don't come for me if I get this wrong, right? And you got all these people on board, and they want to know that we're headed in the right direction. And so a lot of times we focus on the plan, getting it approved, like I said, from the C-suite, from executive partners. But really, like, a lot of the times the plan really affects the folks who are doing the work day to day, right? Like, how are we going to accomplish all of these goals? So, as you're thinking about your team's work, like day to day, how does your plan for your annual plan impact your team's workloads, the priorities, like keeping up team morale? Like, what are you going to do differently in 2025 better to make your team's life better?
Yeah, well, and just to kind of jump in there and continue the metaphor, you don't want to be the person who basically approved the exhaust port that allows for a missile to come in and blow everything up. And so I think building essentially on kind of what Nicole also has just said, is when you take the time investment to go back through all of those steps and do the design work. I think that there's this idea maybe that in TA, it's like, oh, well, we can just turn this faucet on. But a lot of more modern business leaders are also adopting much more of a mindset that if you think of each role as a project, you don't want to launch a project that's incomplete. And unlike projects where you can sort of get out an MVP, you sort of don't want to be hiring an MVP type sometimes into the roles, because that person might not be able to execute on the tactical pieces that you need to do to be really making sure that you're driving towards that goal that the company has picked. And I think one of the things that I do, especially on the recruiting operations side, is try to get as much context for everything and discover that why, so that people can align on the why, knowing that any ambiguity that sort of comes up or has arisen, or new technology changes or things like that have happened, allow you to be more adaptive to it, because everybody knows which direction you're trying to go.
Nona, how are you making your team's life easier as you're building your plan for 2025? And you have a big team, right?
Yeah, I do. And, I think it's bringing people along in the journey, being very transparent. For me, it's building out roadmaps where everyone can see where we're going. And that's, the stakeholders, my team, and ensuring we are aligned on priorities. And sometimes, I have to change those midstream. They started as one thing. And as we all know, the business needs change, and they dictate then how we adapt. And so for me, just that transparency piece, always having very clear roadmaps around what we're planning to deliver, where we need to be going to achieve something. Project planning, I lean very heavily into my program managers to help me ensure operationally we have things mapped out. So whoever looks at the information, whether it's an HR partner, a business partner, a recruiting coordinator, they can clearly see the vision and the runway that we've established. And yes, it's always kind of written in, on the whiteboard so we can erase it, or in pencil, but, it's something that is kind of our guide to make sure everyone's going on the same path in the same direction.
Yeah. Let's talk about money a little bit, right? Because you guys have these amazing plans, and everyone's going to have an amazing 2025 because the TA plan is solid. But you need money to do all of this stuff, especially with like all the technologies out there. We released a stat recently. It's like there were like 100 and I don't know 50, 60 tools in the marketplace in like 2015. I can't believe I remember this, and now there's like 500 or something like that. Like there's just so many things vying for budget, for attention. RFPs are out the door. Like all these things are happening. Nicole, when you're competing for budget with other departments, like how do you make your case stand out? Like what specific metrics or stories have worked for you to get execs and finance on board?
Yeah. What's most unexpected, and this varies company to company, even industry to industry, is attrition. And that tends to not get nearly as much billing from various different teams. But taking it one step further, let's say you're like, no, Nicole, I've got attrition. We've got that under control. Okay, great. Attrition doesn't usually come in these very nice, even numbers of 15% or 20% or 25%, depending on department, age of teams and whatnot. It's not spread like peanut butter evenly across the year or evenly across quarters. So really, when you're thinking about competing, it's taking this attrition for your recruiting capacity a step further in your scenario planning. And it's actually doing more of a cohort analysis. So when you think about the different economic drivers of what happens for attrition, and actually breaking this down by more specific employee groups and adding this level of precision to understand what attrition will look like and when, that starts to become a very different and much more powerful story because you're rooting it in the actual data. And of course, you're working with your partners in HR and your partners in finance. But headcount staying flat does not mean no hiring. I think most of us are aligned on that messaging. But there's more than that. One person gets promoted or leaves the business. That can kick off a chain reaction. And perhaps that backfill is now split into two roles. Well, that can really start to mess up some of your attrition and succession planning and so on. But by doing the analysis along with your partners in HR, along with the business leaders, along with finance, again, I know I'm starting to repeat myself today too, Brandis, but this is when you start speaking in the same language of the finance team. What does finance care deeply about? Think about like their monthly close. They care about precision. So if you can operate in that same, that drumbeat of precision and getting to that precision, they're going to love you. And then all of a sudden, this very much of a back and forth relationship, as opposed to you going and saying, hey, I need another recruiter, or I need 10 more recruiters, or I need however much more to spend on tech.
Yeah. I mean, there were so many moments in that, Jeremy. No, I saw you clapping along. Like, Jeremy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to take a moment to say I can't come up with anything as great as what that response is, because it just so hits the nail on the head. If I was to contribute anything else to sort of that overall conversation, I think one of the things that I do want to go and try and get budget to do anything is work with the idea that the investment in recruiting as a strategic function yields results to the business. So oftentimes, if it's, hey, I need this new tool or anything like that, it's that ROI, that immediate ROI piece, and showing by using the data to validate it. And also going back to earlier points, using their language with them. So if you're talking to finance, finance is probably going to be thinking about the way that you're talking about things as burn rate or anything like that. So how do you sort of code switch your language to their language, and also then phrase it back to them as sort of like, help me help you. And if you're willing to help me help you, this is all really going to just be benefiting you. And we won't necessarily need to have this conversation maybe down the road once we've seen the ROI.
Yeah. I just want to take a minute because hearing both of you talk just now, I just want to like for everyone watching, like a collective, just like deep breath because your jobs are hard. There's so much to juggle and so much to think about. And so, as a little bit of an outsider, I just want to, give some recognition and some hand claps to you guys for just taking this on in general and just for all the work you do. Anyway, enough therapy. Um, so we're going to make these asks and these things are going to happen. No, I'm curious. Like, you're going to get pushback from finance. You're going to get pushback from leadership. It happens to everyone. So what's your strategy on like navigating those conversations? And can you share an example where maybe pushback led to a stronger plan?
Yeah, I know for sure. I mean, budget keeps me awake at night. And, I've been with companies where budget was so tight I had to give up my firstborn to get anything done. And then I've been at other companies where it's so frugal. I'm like, wow, they are not so frugal. They're so spendy and not frugal that I'm like, wow, this is very different. And so for me, many times I've run into pushback from the business. And how I approach it is I always go in first and let them know what is the value that this is going to add for them. So when I'm taking an ask forward, whether it's for running an event or I'm going to my finance person to add budget to purchase a tool that I need, is I want them to understand the value that it's going to bring to how we recruit, our delivery time, because at the end of the day, all they care about is, are we going to deliver butts and seats? So I always have to make sure I'm positioning that value and then the ROI, like what is projected ROI? Because many times we don't know, but I need to have a plan, not just go in and ask, but like, I had an example where a business team they really were resistant in funding a recruiting event that we wanted to do. And we had this huge need for software engineers, and the recruiting event was about $30,000 to do. And so I had to really go in and, have conversations of like, here's the value, here's our projected, return is 20% of these attendees will turn into applicants. So I had to be give them very tangible numbers so that they could really understand, okay, if we do this event and spend this money and we turn 20% of the 100 attendees into applicants, and then the downflow results in, 3 hires, that's a win. But I had to make sure I was very prepared with that, not just going in with the ask and the why we need to do this, but here is the value that it will add and the projected outcome that it will add. So I would say anybody that's trying to influence a no, make sure that you always go in with a solution and what the value to them, because that's all the person funding it wants to know, what the value is to them. So I would say, take your business case in, not just on the ask, but what the outcome is projected to be.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk about ROI then. So Jeremy, is there a metric that you've seen that like will get finance's attention? I know this is like widely debated, like what hiring metric is the one, but like what in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, there are kind of two that I've heard finance people kind of use different language around, but are very easy for them to understand, even though they can be very difficult for us to calculate. And I say us to calculate because it will depend on what you consider the starting point of something in it. And those are usually cost per hire. And that can be factoring with tools and salaries and costing of interviews, things like that, if you're that analytically driven. And the other one that I've seen has been average salary by geo. Is usually one that the finance team tends to look at, because if you're a company that is saying, okay, we want everybody in office and we want everybody in office in the Bay Area, you're going to be paying significantly higher salaries to those areas. And I've seen and worked with recruiting teams on the operation side to actually demonstrate why you should continue to do remote hiring and why you can set up a base of operations somewhere else outside of just these like concentrated pots, because not only does that lower salary costs and costs of living, but it also helps talent diversity, talent mapping, talent intelligence. And so people, once they sort of start to see the dollars and cents of it, think very differently to the finance area around like other metrics that you can bring. The point is less that you bring the metrics. The point is that you bring the story and let the metrics validate your story to those teams.
That is such an amazing segue, Nicole. Like, what narratives, like, what stories have resonated the most with folks that you work with to show that TA isn't just an expense?
Yeah, so there's two big ones that I'm going to go in kind of different directions here. On the one side, you've got your team, right? And think about like very clear expectations and controlling the controllables there. But then on the other hand, in terms of like what is the business thinking about and where does the value come from? I've talked about this proactive approach. I already talked about attrition. So the natural, sorry for the groan moment, successor to attrition is succession planning. And when you think about succession planning and getting really out ahead of that, that tends to be something that tends to fall off of people's radar. You've got some wonderful proactive leaders who are actively thinking about all of that. But that's also your job, along with your HR partners and your leaders, to be thinking about that as well. This is just one other area that the TA team is going to bring and drive value. And when you think about these very, very lean talent acquisition teams, which have been the case for the past 2 years now, 2.5 years now, following the kind of bullwhip effect that happened, 4 years ago now, that's something that we're going to start to really feel the pain of coming up, right? When you think about the natural cycles of the average tenure of employees, and you hear about some people who are leaving certain industries, leaving the workforce entirely. You think about the lack of internship programs. You think about the lack of some early in career programs that exist in some companies, and succession planning is going to start to really rear its head. The TA leaders who are coming and bringing that conversation and thinking about, okay, this is what I've been thinking about. Here's what we're going to do at these either different functions across the business and or these different levels of the business, whether that's at the executive level, the leadership level, the managerial level, or the experienced individual contributor level, and being out ahead of those conversations.
Nona, Jeremy. Well, Jeremy, we heard from you already. Nona, anything to have?
Yeah, I think I would tell people, don't be afraid to work directly with the business and not just with finance. So many times my successes have been going directly to the business and laying out the business case, timelines around it. And the majority of the time I've been successful getting them to agree to fund something, support something that then goes back down to finance. Because in some orgs, it'll be very different. Like I've been with some companies where, all roads led through finance. I've been at other companies where the business tells finance what they want to fund. Like they know their budget and they just say, yes, I've approved this, make sure it happens. And so I think, look at your model. And if you have a direct path to the business, they're your champion. Like get them on board to help you when you're getting no's on a budget or when you just don't have budget. Many times I've not had a budget and or very little. And so the business, was truly my money partner, and they would champion different causes. But again, always have a good business case. I say, both, Jeremy and Nicole spoke about measuring the ROI and making sure you have that data, like make sure you're very data driven. And if you don't have that knowledge, like a lot of TA people that are probably listening today are like, well, I've never had to do that. I don't really have that knowledge. Is lean into your analysts and your comp partners and things like that to help you start learning how to build those business cases and your finance partners around what you need.
Awesome. Let's see, I see a few questions coming in. So, and either any three of you can answer this question, I'm sure. How does your focus shift as businesses scale up? So moving from a smaller set of controllables to stakeholders with budgets. Did I get that right, Ross? Does that make sense to everyone here?
Yeah, I mean, I think so when I think about this from an operational standpoint, I think one of the things that a recruiting operations team is always trying to do is work towards a level of standardization and guardrails and basically helping the company define the sandbox. Because I think largely what ends up happening when companies expand, and I've been at companies where it's like, hey, we're at 10 now and we're now at 30, or you're at 1,000 and you're now at 2,000. And I think one of the biggest things that I always see is that certain processes, certain types, certain ways that you interview, and certain ways you go about things aren't as airtight or aren't as flexible as they need to be. And so the more you sort of pile on top of them, the more it cracks under the weight of each of those things. So one of the things that I always work with people on, and other people I've worked with have always worked with people on, is consistently pressure testing your ideas, your process, so that when your company gets bigger and you get more stakeholders and you get more opinions, you have it sort of built into your company's DNA and culture, so that it's not this like, hey, now we're going from I was at a company where we went from no bar raiser type interviews to it's a 10,000 person company and we want to put in bar raisers. Well, it wasn't part of the cultural identity of that company. And so everybody pushed back. And so you have to take into account like what is in our DNA. And if we need to go out and change our DNA, what do we need to do and how are we going to get buy-in to those things? And then control for those.
Yeah. And I would say to add on, Jeremy, is you need to be a change champion, a change management champion, and be able to help take people along on the journey. Because when you're in companies where they've been doing something the same way for a while and you see resistance, then figure out a way to find someone within the business who is fearless to pilot something and use that opportunity to drive change management through others seeing what this pilot is doing, the impact this pilot or prototype, whatever you want to call it, is having for this business leader. And then a lot of times you can bring other people to say, okay, I'm not so resistant because we've tried it and it's working. Now I'm open to it. So I would say, don't be afraid to run pilots. Don't be afraid to find that champion that would help you drive this change. Work with your HR partners because change is hard. And as a TA, recruiter, leader, anywhere in the TA space, you have to be open to being fearless as well to push the change. But again, bringing people along on your journey really helps. But that I think to Jeremy's point is change management has to be something we understand as well as TA professionals and how to influence.
Yeah, 100%. So the title of this WTF, what to fix in recruiting, I feel like I have to say that sometimes, is how to nail your 2025 TA plan and stay sane. And I know what has driven a lot of people away from their sanity is just the craziness of the industry over the last several years. So let's talk about just 2025, like preparing for the unexpected. And I'm going to try to combine all these things because we're running up on time. So, like you look at economic shifts, you look at new technologies, hiring freezes, like attrition that Nicole was mentioning. I mean, just like your plan needs to be agile. And, whether you're talking to executives or hiring managers, like expectations are evolving, how you're going to deliver is evolving. Like, how do you shift your priorities? How do you stay true to your team's goals? Like, just talking about it, like I'm losing a little bit of sanity right here. So what's one curveball that you're already preparing for? And how are you building flexibility into your plan for next year, Nicole?
So I'd say 2 to 3 big things. Make sure that you've got a bench of recruiting talent. So you're building this plan, everything else like that. When you're ready, you've got to be ready to go. As much as yes, there's a great market that's out there, having that ready to go is going to really help to instill confidence that you can execute on that quickly. And then the other one that I know we haven't spent as much time talking about, that's a pretty straightforward one is pipeline pass-through rate forecasting and understanding how your funnel actually works. How are people passing through? Are your interview processes actually getting the results that you want? Like doing some inspection there. Do you have 8 interview touch points when 4 or 5 will do? Because I will tell you that we did, and we recently fixed it. And wow, what a big fix. And then thinking about how much of an impact that can make. But I'd say a big part of that is also soliciting feedback. Don't be wish casting what you want your pipeline pass through rate to be. Don't be sandbagging it either, because then you're going to lose trust with your business partners, with your finance partners, with your recruiting team, across the board. So get buy-in along the way. Pressure test. Does this sound right? Does this seem right? What was different about it 1 year ago from the data versus what I'm forecasting right now? Because when you get buy-in along the way from educating leaders about how people are just moving through your pipeline from the very top of funnel, like the event that Nona was talking about, all the way through to your offer accept rate, you're educating and you're seeding advocates all the way throughout the business. And then it's not just you who's talking about it. It's great. You've got to talk about it. It's your job. But then when you've seeded all of these advocates throughout the business and you've got all of your hiring managers and department heads and department leaders thinking about it and talking about it too, then it's not just the drumbeat that you're holding any longer. It's what the whole company is thinking about when it does come to hiring.
I like the term wish casting. I want to use that in other places. I think when I think about this too, I think of an old Mike Tyson quote that goes back to a former quote that's much older, but it's basically everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Or best laid plans only survive first contact, because the minute something happens, you have to be pivoting and you have to be changing and you have to build for flexibility. And so I think on the operation side, a lot of times when we're building out our plans and we're thinking through our plans, we're thinking through sort of 3 buckets of how we can think about the plan will go. And that is, all right, if we were planning to do this and we don't get to it, if we change nothing, what will happen? If we change some of these things, what will happen? And if we can change all of these things, what will happen? And you start to build out sort of different frameworks so that once something maybe gets shut off or turned on, you're able to sort of go to like, okay, this fits into this bucket. Now let's pull out plan B, C, D, and going straight down in all those possible permutations. And that's not to say it's totally random, but you certainly get into the mindset of, well, this looks like a duck. It sounds like a duck. Let's not convince ourselves it's chicken. It's a duck. Let's go down our duck planning route.
And then just to add to what both of them said, I would say 2 things that I really live by is people and enablement. And when I say that, I mean, know your people, do quarterly talent reviews. So whether you're having an ebb or a high flow, if you don't know your people and you're just waiting until performance reviews happen, things like that, do a quarterly talent review. Know who your hypos are. Know the ones that aren't meeting expectations. Get them on a performance plan. Look at where, if you're in a lull, where can people be stretched to do other things and keep busy? If you're in a high, who can stretch over and take on more? And then the enablement piece is know your tools, like know what's helping your recruiters be able to do their job and deliver. Because as a delivery function, our job is to get butts in seats. And so if we don't have the right people in the right role and we don't have the right tools that enable them to do their jobs, we're not going to hit our numbers. And so making sure that you've invested in the right areas around technology, systems, process. Like I've seen some processes that I'm like, I know why this doesn't work. The process, it's so long. So know your people and know how you're enabling them to be successful.
Ross has a question. What's one forecasting tool out of the box that would equip you in a new HR? Goodness, I cannot read right now. Can you guys read this? Jeremy, read this for me.
Sure. What's one forecasting tool out of the box that would equip a new HR and TA effort with a small to medium org in mind to this is a fantastic presentation. Can we get a recording?
The answer to number 2 is yes.
Yeah,
What's the
answer-
forecasting tool you guys are using?
Yeah, on the forecasting tool, I mean, GEMS is actually really good. There's this capacity planning that you can do, and you can actually tinker with how many roles there will be, how many recs that each person can take. You can actually break it down by department. So if you know that your go-to-market function, you can have your recruiters can have more hires per quarter than say your technology, like engineering or something like that function. You know, there's different volume that you can hold your recruiters accountable to. You can actually put different kind of quotas in place there, and it's really user friendly. So that
I would
just
plus one. I would plus one on that. Yeah.
All right. 2 votes for Jem. Awesome. I'm gonna leave that where it's at. All right. So I just want to say, like, a lot of times when people watch these things, we've said a lot in the last 40 minutes or so. So gathering all of you here as the experts, as we wrap this up, can you guys tell me, like, what's the one thing that a person watching this conversation should walk away with? It can be something you said, you can hype yourself up, or it can be something you heard another panelist say. But I always like to summarize it in that way that, like, if you're going to go back to your desk or wherever you are, take this one thing away from this conversation. Jeremy.
I think the biggest thing that I would, besides wish casting, because I think that's going to become a post-it note on my computer screen. I think the biggest thing that I can say to take away from is do not be afraid to actually structure a plan. I think people think that that's very old-fashioned, but pulling out a piece of paper and a pen and writing it out and doing that planning, you will never regret having thought out and gone back to first principles.
No, what about you?
Yeah, I would say be solution minded. And this goes to what Jeremy said about the plan. When you're solution minded, think in the SMART acronym. When you're writing out your plan, it should be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. And if you think in that SMART methodology when you're writing your plan out and when you're being solution oriented and not just reactive, like what is the solution for this problem before you take it to anyone, it's going to help you so much as in the TA world.
Nicole, take us home.
to write it down. I worked for a company that was actually one of the company's values, and every once in a while it got used. I'd kind of eye roll in the moment, but I eye rolled because I knew it was true. And writing it down is so important for so many things, whether that's pen and paper, whether that's a doc, whether that's an app that you use, voice to text, however it works best for you, write it down. And the reason it's so important to write it down, let's say you get a no, right? That's disappointing. Yes. For all my TA leaders out there who started off as recruiters, let's put this in a recruiting context. I do this for my team a lot. I'm like, okay, we're trying to figure out a problem. Let's put this in the context of being a recruiter. As a recruiter, let's say that you go all the way through the process, really tough role. Your candidate who you make an offer to turns your offer down. What's next? Do you have a silver medalist? Do you have other people who are in the final rounds of interviews? Or are you starting all the way over again, right? So what's your backup plan? So if you get that no, that's disappointing. Don't sit in that disappointment. Have a backup plan, have alternative options, and writing it down, even from there, once you get that no, socialize what you won't be able to do. And that's okay. Being able to go back to that and point to that shows that if you do come back and get to unlock more resources throughout the year, yes, we're in annual planning right now. Yes, things are going to change. Yes, you might get some recruiters in Q3 or some tech in Q3 because things change. That's what happens. Be prepared to say, here's what we can unlock because you had it all written down. Just like Jeremy said, and just like Nona said, it will be a very, very good use of your time. But then the last thing I will say is, if you are going to do that, don't forget to layer in some time. Don't ever promise that it will be something that will be an immediate flip the switch. So build that time in, but write it down.
I love that. Thank you, Nicole, Jeremy, Nona, for your time, your expertise. Really, really appreciate it. WTF is back on January 9th after the new year with some 2025 predictions. So tune in there. If you're in planning right now, you're trying to stay sane, the session will be sent out. You guys can watch it again, share it with a friend, send it to everyone because some really, really awesome insights were shared today. And I know they're going to be valuable to all of your planning for next year. I won't see you guys till next year. So enjoy whatever the holidays bring for you. Nona, Jeremy, Nicole, really appreciate you for stopping by. And we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.